Welcome to Podcast This Escape, the podcast where we talk about the escape room that we escaped from in the previous episode of this podcast. David, thank you for the room. We did it. We got
made it
out
out.
of geometry class.
Yeah, you guys did fabulously.
Oh, really? Because we felt stuck. Oh boy, that was like, there are two forms of rooms. One where you like find a piece, use a piece, and you get little more pieces along the way. And then there are others where it is, here is your avalanche of information, and now let's work and actually unscramble it and figure out where everything goes. And this was definitely the latter.
This was a real buckshot of a room. There were a couple of points where I felt like, oh, I need to apologize for this puzzle.
I've been there, don't worry.
I kind of realized after I'd run it a couple times, I was like, this is maybe a solid season 1 room. I kind of realized as I listened, further after having designed the room, I was like, this isn't quite as conceptual as some of them, but it's honest work.
No, yeah, it did great. The only thing that I think, for me, the big thing that really stuck me was, it's one of those ones where, obviously for escape rooms, you don't need outside knowledge, but sometimes when outside knowledge related words are thrown at you, even if you don't need to understand them, it intimidates your brain.
Yes. Yeah, I got that feedback on one of my 3 playtests. So that was kind of in the back of my head, and I was like, oh, does this only make sense to me?
Yeah, and like, no, everything does sort of work, but it is one of those things. It's such a fine line. Like, I always want to incorporate things that I know a lot about into my rooms and things that I like, and then you've got to just figure out, wait a second, how much of this will actually like teach them about these things, and how much of it is going to be terrifying. And it's not even a problem if it's terrifying, as long as you can work through it, and we can work through it. So the terrifying isn't a problem. It's just a thing that people's brains do to them. And it's exactly the same as normal, like, math problems. I'm having to tell students that all the time. I don't know, David, you mentioned being a teacher.
Yes.
I assume you got the same thing, where sometimes it's like the wording of the question is deliberately set out to intimidate them, even though the maths part is easy.
Correct, yes. And there are a lot of, honestly, it's kind of a transferable skill between teaching a class and then games mastering is the balance that you have to strike between, like, this is information that I know you can understand if I just show you my point of view on it, but the productive struggle is the destination in a lot of ways.
Fair enough. All right. So, what, tell us a bit about your process for making this room, and like things that might have changed along the way. What was your starting point?
So my starting point was while I was at work, during the time period in which I was, started having the genesis of this puzzle, or this room rather, I would come up with ideas for isolated puzzles and think of like, oh, that would be cool if you could make these two things connect in a way. And then I kind of realized that the through thread was like, this is very maths computery. And I had enough experience in that like physical setting that I was like able to make that kind of map to a real place. And so if you looked at my notes that are in my original like notes app as I came up with ideas for puzzles, it's really gibberish. And it's seen a lot of polish since then, and I think arguably could see another layer of polish to be more cohesive, I guess.
We definitely had one issue in terms of like iterations of a room, right? Like where I think we got caught on a thing that you had still in there. You mentioned, I'm not sure if it made the edit or not, that you had like a ghost.
There was a bit of a ghost puzzle
like
somewhere,
puzzle,
so
like
something else was going on there.
A puzzle that was not anymore.
So yeah, that the old fatback 90s PC. Originally, the Tetris emulator was supposed to have been on there because that was personally just my first experience with like emulators and stuff was on a computer that looked like that. And then I as I started to work through like the appropriate levels of gatekeeping so that I don't make a closed loop where you need to like
Yeah.
unlock something that unlocks itself, but also make some of the other stuff in the room necessary. There was not a good way for me to make the PC like to where you could get the Tetris file on there without it just being on the, you know,
Because
it was-
everything else is USB based and that doesn't quite function with that computer.
right. And I didn't want to have somebody have to email themselves Tetris or, you know, that's a very real world.
Real world.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. That's true. Like there is a point where there is some technology stuff like that where I just go, oh no, now I'm working.
And so that was interesting. So that's the sort of stuff where, like, as things like as you iterate and change and test, and you think, oh, I'll take this out, I'll take this out. You know, it can be interesting. Like from a player perspective, because we're getting through all the stuff on our list of like, what haven't we dealt with? What have we still not looked at? Like what is yet to be? And because it was there, it's like it must still be a puzzle. It was on our list for a while,
But instead, it was much more like a real escape room where
some things are just there.
Things are pretty.
They're just there because they're there.
I will say that it is definitely the best drawing on my entire page.
Nice.
I tried my best to avoid having unnecessary objects described, which is part of why, like at the beginning, there are some desks here, because they needed to be there, and like in the very first iteration of the room, there were 2 clocks puzzles, and then as I started to digitize this in a Google document for myself, I was like, this could just be one.
Fair.
So what was the original second puzzle?
Originally, there was a clock puzzle that just gave you a key, and I realized I've like the key is kind of a dead horse at this point. I've got 4 of them floating around in the room. I need to diversify my lock infrastructure.
Gotcha. What did you, Billy? What part did you feel best about when you were going through it? Because we did spend a lot of time feeling lost. So let's find the bits where we felt good about ourselves.
I liked doing laptop. Laptop was great fun.
I agree. I enjoyed that a lot. Because the answer revealing itself as you go, it makes you feel like, okay, I'm doing this right, and then feeling offended at the end of it. I did. I like that. But also in just a room of so many terms and so much vocabulary that scares my brain, it was nice going into, okay, this is Greek. I have a little bit of that. I can work with this. So that was nice. That was the soothing portion. I liked being able to go just right at the very end. Hello, Kitty. 3 apples. There's an Apple computer. I don't know what to do with it, but I'm making that connection.
Yes, that was nice, going from an apple to an apple. I thought, as we were doing it, that we were going to have to identify the people related to their assignments. Like who was... So I was trying to figure out like this whole like who's missing an assignment, who's giving an assignment. Was the purpose of the people in this case just to let us know what assignments we might want to look at? Was it just like to set up these was what you should look at?
So the way that worked in my brain was that there was a technically more efficient way to do it than brute force.
I'm sure.
Because you correctly identified that Catherine Tate is in both classes because there were only 5 student flash drives you end up using. So that was part of the confounding part about my half-baked attempt at a logic puzzle.
I legit thought that someone had just handed in, no, Tetris. I made this. This is totally mine. This is my assignment.
Sure.
Right. So my intent was that was supposed to be...
That's fair.
The subtle signposting between, like, Chris's laptop is the only one with WinZip, and there's only one zip folder labeled my stuff, you know, so that was kind of what I was thinking, I guess, with that. And then the names were more or less completely arbitrary.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, it was just how many actors could I name from Doctor
Sure.
Who? And instead of just doxing people in my real life, you know, with their full names or John Doe again, so it was basically for you to be able to see, like, there was an A3 for both classes, and for you to be able to determine which A3 you were looking at was my intent with that logic puzzle. I maybe fumbled the landing a little bit.
Is it work outable whose each USBs is?
It is. It is. So because there's another subtle Easter egg in here.
What? We missed something.
So the 3-digit number that is each flash drive is the year that actor started on the show minus
What?
like the thousands digits. So like Chris Eccleston, his flash drive was 2005 minus the 2, so it was 005.
And then 1970, 1966, etc.
But that is strictly a like, if that stayed inside my head, the puzzle still works.
Wild.
Because
like that.
So John, who is
apparently
missing...
I would have been totally cool with just saying, no, more Doctor Who knowledge required for this room.
Yeah, so that was kind of the line that I failed to toe between like how I don't know. That might be one that the connections do only work to me and needs additional workshopping. But yeah, so John JP, who was missing A3 and A2, his was 970 because they are both still missing.
Yep.
But those are the only two that are there.
Yeah,
and so
I started figuring that, but as we were looking at them and seeing which ones were missing in that way, that they did indeed seem to relate more. But at that stage, it felt like we were halfway through, and so going back to figure it out, it felt like we'd be doing it in reverse.
That was the other thing, is that depending on the order that you look at things, and this might be true for other rooms, but if you go to things in like quote unquote the like railroady order, it's less of a deluge and more of a like step 1, step 2, step 3.
It's absolutely a challenging thing to do in this format, to try to figure that out. And because, not only trying to see, hey, have I gated everything the way I want it to? Do the steps make sense to get you from beginning to end? But what is the level of satisfaction or challenge that comes from just messing up the order? Because you don't have control over that. It's one of few things that is hard to, you can't just steer them very easily in the GM role of this format.
Yeah, and if I was like playing for an exact clone of myself, the room, I mean, I guess you could argue would be over in like 12 seconds. But, somebody whose brain was formatted the same way mine is, I guess you could say, like the first playtest I did for this, I'm going to be honest with you, was almost completely improvised. I had all the numbers, I knew where everything was, and that was my smoothest one. And so that gave me a lot of confidence, even though the only thing that really changed was that PC puzzle and the clock. Like that one, I just happened to have found somebody that vibed with the way I was thinking when I was thinking this way.
And that's so hard when coming on and doing something for us. We have no idea how in sync our brains are going to be. We had that like with the last one that we recorded as well. We were thinking exactly the same thing. I think that was like the first comment that we made in the post show of that one, was we had to take a minute to figure out how our brains aligned, and from there things worked.
Yeah, there's always things about that, especially with like searching methods and what to look at and what's going to be important and what's not, and so so like for some people when we have them come on for guest rooms, we'll be like, oh, we look at this, and they'll say you find nothing, and then we're like, okay, that's odd, and we have to think to ourselves, wait a minute, hold on, wait,
was that a real nothing? Or...
I lift up a chair and look at, I turn, and they're like, haha, you find the thing. We're like, okay, cool, we've established this early on, now we know to like search in very specific terms to like be part of their solutions. Whereas by this point with your rooms, Danny, you're generally like, yeah, if you say you look at it, I'll assume you're searching it and rummaging and looking at all that sort of stuff.
Yes,
and so it's like finding those things. And I think for this one, there was like information that was there, but not necessarily like, there were like other opportunities into something rather than being like requisite, you must know these. So like when we were looking at people with their classes, with their assignments, I'm thinking, to me, like the way my brain is, it's like, okay, well, this is a solvable puzzle in which we will be able to specifically assign each of these USBs to each of those people based on the classes they're missing and the things that they've submitted. And then once we solve that, we'll get the solution.
Something.
But instead it was like, no, it's another hint at like what sort of assignments could be. It's like another piece of real information that you can reference to like confirm certain thoughts rather than a fully solvable, this puzzle will have a solution. And so I'm sitting there going like, when do I solve it? How do I get to how do I know that this is Sylvester McCoy's thing? If he's missing A3, do I need one that has A5 and A8? Do I need to, and I was like kind of caught up on trying to solve a puzzle that wasn't really a
definitely had a moat with that with the IP addresses. I think just because they are long numbers and you had them and they were just actual specified numbers. And because I'm not much for IP addresses, I went, surely, what are you doing?
I'm messing it up.
No,
I'm messing up
I can't remember how to solve it. And so I just ended up, and I don't know much about IP addresses, that I thought, surely no one knows enough about IP addresses to just have 3 solid IP addresses that are just IP addresses. There must be something hidden in here.
This was, I see that. So, Bill, back to what you were saying. I think that I left in a lot of things that feel like loose threads that the way I saw them was a safety net, you know? So if you get stuck, you can refer to the way it was described as like a hint for continuing to chug through. But I guess the swing and the miss there between our ways of thinking was like that you saw that as like the second half of this has gone unsatisfied. So that's interesting to think about.
Yeah, and it's just, I wouldn't even call it like a swing and a miss. It's just this thing of like a difference in the expectations we had for what each of these will be. In the same way that
it's just an inevitability. We don't know each other. We don't know how our brains work.
But it's similar, as Danny said, like sometimes in physical rooms. Like in a physical room, you don't go up to every single object and be like, we never solved this book. But like, that's just a book. Like it's there as part of the room. It's part of like the spacing. It's part of
everyone's got their own puzzle language, and you got to learn it with different people.
Yeah,
that's how this goes.
When you're like reading through like a puzzle hunt and then trying to solve all of the introductions to this. And it's like, no, the intro was just a bit of fun to get us to the puzzle. Don't worry about the intro.
You can worry about that later.
That was just a story I wrote. Maybe it's in the meta, but it's not part of the puzzle. You're like, okay. And once you get used to it, it's fine.
For sure.
And if we did
and then there are some people that you never get used to in a puzzle hunt, and you don't want to see their name at the top of the puzzle.
And you move on. But so yeah, like if we did a second room,
we would understand your style more.
I'd be like, okay, cool.
We would be better.
It's like part of your design is like almost finding the puzzle inside all the information. It's like
how many times have we had guests come on here and we invite them back a second time, and they are so much better their second time because now they get what I do.
Yeah, so like if we go like, okay, I'm doing another David room, we'll be like, okay, cool, we've got these things. Which of I see we're getting funneled down to like this input. Yeah. And all of these were like little hints on the way in, as opposed to each of them being its own puzzle. It's just a different sort of structural thing to get used to. But it definitely caught my brain a little bit for a while. And I was like, but how do I solve it? I need to solve you.
And it's like that improv game, like Mind Meld, I think they call it, where you both say a word simultaneously, and then you both try to think like, how do I make my word closer to theirs and theirs closer to mine? You eventually get to like the same thing. So the converse to that would be like, you would take a step my way and think like, okay, you are finding the man in the marble, you are finding the puzzle and the clues, and then I would. I mean, you run the risk of like orbiting each other forever.
Yeah. And then because you start being like, I better put more like puzzles that need to be solved, and then I'm ignoring them because I'm thinking, no, let's just keep going. Yeah, it can definitely happen that way.
It's the one half of one half of one half, and you eventually get close enough for practical purposes.
yeah, true. But no, look, it was a lot of fun. It was a cool room. I really like the spacing as well. I think that's one of those ones that sometimes gets glossed over in some people's rooms or something, like, as not necessarily glossed over. It's like it's not as major. But this I really liked. Like the physical space was a really nicely like immersive space in an audio thing. Like I knew where I was and what was going on.
That's true.
And I had like a very clear like, yep, this is like there's a structure of a classroom here that makes sense. I'm moving through this, and I thought that was really nice in this room. It had a very good sense of space and self, and I thought that was really nice. So sometimes that doesn't come out as much in rooms, but this one I thought was really nicely put together, and I think that's maybe a reflection of your experience game mastering and running things like that, right? Like it requires like a sense of a shared theater of the mind space to be in, and I think that worked really smoothly for this one.
Thank you. And that was one of the things that I kind of thought about post room creation. Was this is a room that in some ways has to be audio for the number of like levels of belief that you have, disbelief that you have to suspend, because I think any rational person would just go out the door and let the alarm blare.
Yeah.
If this was a real room, you would clearly see that like poster wasn't fully a poster. It was partially a facade, you know?
It would at least be an option. Yeah.
Like by and large, I felt like this is a room that could maybe physically exist, which is kind of why in the, I don't know if this made the edit for the first half of these two episodes. I said this feels like a solid, maybe like medium difficult season 1 room. Like this is a room that has a practical purpose.
Yeah. It's a place to be.
Well, I was wondering that for a couple of these puzzles, especially because to an extent, there's a little bit of learning available in bits and pieces. Do you ever incorporate puzzle-based challenges into classes that you run? Is this a thing that your workplace invites?
So in the last year that I taught, the year academically is structured in a strange way around state testing or whatever. And so there's like a 2.5 week gap at the end of you have to be in the building time after these are the mandatory things that the district requires of you. And all of the teachers are like, okay, we are running damage control. And the book has a series of projects and all the students are like, oh my goodness, why are you giving me more projects? And one of which was actually about designing an escape room for.
Oh, okay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was like 3 of the clues have to be solutions to like an equation, but everything else just have at it. And I had some interesting entries to that, but then I also had some. You walk 5 steps and there is a key, and you walk 3 steps and there is a key.
Sure.
Yeah. Didn't say that to be a good escape room.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, lovely. All right. Well, I think I think we can finish up there in terms of talking about the room. David, thank you so much for coming on and running the room for us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was a great experience. It was it makes me want to go back and do some more maths and coding and things like that.
Yeah, I need to do more maths.
For people, I know we mentioned in the first episode, you've got a show of your own that's sort of coming out soon or may have just come out depending on the timing of this episode's release. Where can people go to find more of what you do online? I think you also do art as well. Like, where do you want to send people? If they've listened to you for this long, where can they go and check out more of your stuff?
If you want to find me as an individual, you can find me almost anywhere as Cotton Squab. So cotton like the material and squab like a bird. Nice. I do pixel art. I do commissions. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Tumblr. I'm not so much on X, formerly Twitter. You search it, it'll be me because it's a unique enough username that I have capitalized on it. I am working on, or have worked on, depending on when you listen to this, a podcast called Chronically Online Chronicles, which is a look at the internet and its influence on individuals, not like politically, not at a large cultural scale, but on like an individual scale. So talking about people's digital stomping grounds from their childhood, their adolescence. How did the internet shape them? And presumably, if you are listening to the show, that is somebody, you are an internet civilian.
I'll have links to that sort of stuff in the show notes below, so hopefully people can go and check it out and listen to more of your fun stuff. Danny, thank you so much for playing a room with me.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to help support the show, let somebody know about it. Tell a friend, tell an enemy, call your senator and say, hey, Senator.
I was going to say your local politician.
Listen to Escape This podcast. And they'll say, sure, why not?
It'll get
your
most
vote.
Of the time.
And then don't vote for him. Got him. You can also help support the show by signing up for the Patreon. Anybody at any level of support can appear as an NPC in one of Danny's rooms, which will be coming up later this season.
So many NPCs in this next half.
So many NPCs when we get to Danny's rooms this season. And then also there's bonus content. There's a new bonus audio episode every week for $5 donors. It's usually behind the scenes stuff or sort of fun little bonus content. Couple of games, solving little mysteries, things like that. There's $10 donors get video content, including a series of reacting to escape rooms in popular culture and things like that.
We got to get on all of this. We've been letting ourselves get very distracted by other projects.
And then there's fun. There's a whole trivia club for $20 donors. For anybody at any level, there's like Danny is writing, there's a Choose Your Own Adventure story that was getting written or is getting written. Lots of fun stuff. And it's the way to help support the show financially. We don't run ads. This is how we make our living, so the support that you give us allows us to keep making a cool show for free for everybody else who wants it. So support the arts, and in this case, the arts is us. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you again, Danny, for playing, and thank you, David.
Thank you so much, David.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, goodbye, everybody.